One of the interesting use cases to use collections is to allow business rules to run on flex forms. With the dynamic nature, we can create a rule that works on any form no matter what the layout. So take this one step further. Users always want to be able to load data in ad hoc, so they can load it in any format they want. The problem is that we can't take advantage of the efficiencies that Groovy provides because the rules can't run in ad hoc submissions. Or can they? Flex forms are not the same as ad hoc, but I bet that you could create 5 to 10 layouts, max, that would give the users the same flexibility. I know it wouldn't be 100% the same, but it would be very close. And since the form layout is irrelevant in Groovy rules, we can run a business rule efficiently on only the data that has been changed. This is an incredible opportunity. The key is Groovy and being able to write the logic to be completely dynamic of the form layout. A great resource in our industry, Mark Fate, and a very close friend, shows this in a demo he presented to a customer. Take a look at this short video. If you don't get excited, something has to be wrong with you. It changes the game for users that refuse to use data forms.
In this recording, I'm going to demonstrate how you can use flex forms in combination with Groovy rules to satisfy some business requirements. So in this particular case, a customer implemented planning back in 2018. During the implementation, the business partners did not want to be constrained by the planning forms, so they created ad hoc templates to allow them to update the data. A schedule was set up to execute business rules combined into a rule set so that the calculations were executed every 20 minutes. And over time, the rule set started taking longer and longer. The rule set is now taking 10 minutes to run. As we investigated the problem, we were able to make suggestions that reduced the calculation time from 10 minutes down to 2 minutes. And with the recent release of flex forms and ability to assign business rules to flex forms, we could potentially reduce the need to have scheduled calculations at all. Flex forms provide the user the ability to make real-time modifications to the layout of a form in SmartView to suit their needs. Because flex forms can utilize business rules, we can utilize Groovy. Groovy can interpret the layout of the form, and Groovy knows what has changed. Thus, the business logic that was built in the rule set could be built dynamically, so only the data that is modified is calculated, and only the ancestors of the modified members are aggregated up through the dimensions. The following illustration is an example of turning an ad hoc form into a flex form. Groovy is assigned to the flex form to highlight the fact that Groovy knows what rule was modified, even though the structure, rows and columns of the flex form, is modified real time by the user. Now, if you extend that a little bit further and you include smart pushes, you can now push that data to a reporting database, only the data that's changed. You could aggregate that data, only the ancestors of the cells that were changed, and you can do all of this using Groovy with a combination of Groovy and flex forms. So in this particular example, you see I've got a form laid out here. I'm going to walk through and talk about this. So this was the ad hoc template that the users were using to submit their data. So I created a flex form that only has one of the columns, the first column. So in this particular case, we have all of these columns. I just basically implemented a form to have the first column, column B, and then all of the periods. So if we go back to the form definition, oops, too far, and we edit the form, you'll see in the layout, I have just exactly that. I put the first column in here, and then I have, really just children of total years, so the periods are there. Now, this is just a regular form. At the back of the form, I send a business rule to run before save is a Groovy rule. If I go back to the layout of the form, the only thing you need to do to make this a flex form is in the SmartView options, you choose to enable the form to flex for columns or rows. In this case, the rows are going to be static. I'm going to let them flex on the columns. And then the other thing you need to do is, because this is the definition of the form, you have to tell it to be able to flex outside the form definition. So you do that by going to the dimension settings, and you say flex beyond the definition. All right, so that's the setup. So I'm going to go back to the actual flex form. And in this flex form, you can see I can go in here and I can change the cell 10. And I'm going to do a submit data. I go back to the actual form, and I'm going to look at the job to read the Groovy script and what it reported. So if you see here, it knows that I made changes. You recall I changed the one cell from missing to 10, so it knows exactly what was changed for the combination. So it knows that I changed that. So let's go back, close out of this. We'll go back to the form. And so now I'm going to expand this form. So I'm going to come over to my other area here, my original template, and I'm just going to copy and paste 3 of these over to expand the definition of the flex form. And I'm going to refresh. As you can see, I've got data in there. So I've got 10 here. So we're going to make this 5. We're going to make this 25, this 30, and this 35. And we're going to submit this. Okay, so you can see it changed. Now, if I go back to my Groovy and my refresh, I'm going to read my Groovy. Groovy knows what cells. There's the 5, the 25, the 30, and the 35. So now you take this a step further. You can build that entire business rule or the rule set dynamically using Groovy to only aggregate and only calculate the cells that needed to be calculated. So hopefully this will give you at least an illustration of how you can leverage flex forms in combination with Groovy to sometimes remove the need to do any kind of schedule calculations.
That was a very simple example, but what happens when dimensions are nested? We can improve the logic to include the unique combinations of sparse dimensions. This example shows 5 different combinations if we don't include period. Normally, fixing on periods is not required, so I don't include it in this case. I don't want to run the product of all edited members because I would calculate products and channels unnecessarily. The job console shows 5 data maps that are executed. This is because we edited 5 unique combinations of 2 different dimensions. The job console shows 2 things. First, the SBase script that was generated. Again, we could add the months to this, but since they are not sparse, I didn't bother to do it in this example. As you can see, there are again 5 different blocks that are calculated. This doesn't calculate the same block twice, and it doesn't calculate any block that wasn't impacted. You can also see the correlation of the data maps that were executed. This also reduces the effort on any movement to only data that is impacted. If you want to fix on periods, the lightning lesson on data form agnostic rules includes an example. This entire solution is discussed in the data form layout agnostic rules and the dynamic data maps. Both have usable scripts that you can use immediately.